Hi, I'm Andrew Wallace, and welcome to the We've Got a Problem podcast, where each week we explore inspiring stories of struggle, success, and solutions to prevalent problems and how our guests have turned a problem into an opportunity. This week I'm joined by Chad Peavy, author of Break and Untangle, Discover the Freedom to Be You Despite the Inherited Mindsets Holding You Back. I think we've all got some inherited mindsets to work through, and I'm really excited to get a chance to talk. Chad, welcome to the show.
Hey, Andrew, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So inherited mindsets, right? We've all got them.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about your inherited mindsets. Give us a little bit of background on you. You grew up in, I was going to say Arkansas, just to be funny, but you grew up in Arkansas with some inherited mindsets. What did you get from there? What brought you to this lowly stage?
It might be easier to go through what I didn't get from there than what I got from there.
All right.
I took quite a bit of baggage out of the natural state. I was a gay kid growing up in rural Arkansas. Have you been to Arkansas, Andrew?
I have not.
Well, it's not exactly gay Mecca. And so for a little gay boy growing up in Arkansas, I didn't have a lot of role models. I didn't have, this was before Will and Grace. I didn't have a lot of people to look to figure out what it was that I was experiencing and going through. And I picked up a whole lot of survival techniques to try to figure out how not to get bullied, how not to get picked on, how not to get found out. And so I would say the inherited mindsets, a vast majority of those inherited mindsets for me were survival mechanisms, defense mechanisms, trying to survive in a threatening environment. I grew up, my dad was a sadist, which had its own complications. We were Christian fundamentalist, and we were in the rural South, and it's just not a hospitable place for a little gay kid.
Right, for sure. And that's even in this day and age, because so much progress has been made lately, it's easy to start to forget that still happens even right now. That people are growing up that way in a world of the internet, when you have all this access and do have a little bit more access than you may have had when you were younger, to at least see that exists, that there are other people out there who are dealing with the same issues or who went through the same thing, and all this, It Gets Better and the Trevor Project and all that stuff that's out there. Sure, but that's still happening. People are still going through that kind of stuff with their families in smaller areas and in swaths of the country. People are struggling.
I think you hit something really important right there. You know, there is a lot more out there, but the things that we are dealing with more often are things that are in here, things that are the shame that I'm growing up with at home, the mindsets that my family has about me being gay, are really the ones that make the difference. Yeah, there's hope once I get out of here. But what I'm dealing with right now today in my home, so those can be really challenging for a young person.
Yes. And of course, looking at how long, when you're young, at least for me, right? When I was young, anything that happened, it felt like it was going to go on forever.
Yeah.
So
yes.
So you can sit there and say, well, that might be nice someday.
Yeah.
That maybe someday that'll happen, but it doesn't feel like someday is going to ever be soon enough.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that's way far ahead. So what brought you to write this book now? Why did you decide to do it?
So that's a good question. Honestly, Andrew, it was a lot of self-therapy. If I'm being really honest with you and your listeners, I wrote the book for me. Mm-hmm. That's a really selfish thing to say. But I'm somebody, because of my upbringing and what I went through, as a consequence of that, I've dealt with a lot of mental health stuff, a lot of internalized homophobia, a lot of shame that led to depression, anxiety, feelings of isolation and loneliness. And I found that I started seeing the school counselor when I was in 4th grade. And nobody back then would have called it depression in my little small town, but they definitely knew that I was different. They knew that I was sad all the time. And so I started seeing the school counselor 4th grade. That went on and on and on. And then I've been in therapy most of my life. And what I realized over the course of all the therapy and self-help and coaches and reading and all of that was that there were some fundamental truths that I needed help and to be reminded of as I went throughout life. And I still find that I wouldn't say cured of depression. It's something that I still experience, anxiety, I still experience it. And when those things happen, when I'm in it, when I'm feeling depressed, when I'm feeling anxious, it's really hard for me to grab onto that best self. And I need reminders. And I thought, well, the best reminder for me would be for me to write down what helps me when I'm depressed. What are the ways that I get out of this? What are the ways that I navigate through feeling depressed and anxious and isolated and lonely? And so I wrote a book to myself, really, with these 12 different mindsets that I discovered were the 12 most prevalent mindsets that I had inherited that I needed to work through. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to give myself that reminder and then be able to offer those insights to anyone that wanted to pick it up and read it.
Yeah, absolutely. So 12 mindsets. Talk to me a little bit about that. Where should somebody start?
I actually have an assessment on my website, chadpeevy.com, where folks can go and do a mindset assessment, and it will break down for you your scores and tell you where an ideal place for you might be to begin that journey. My book is written in such a way that you don't have to go from beginning to end, but you can jump right into the mindset that makes sense for you. When I was putting the book together, I discovered that there were these 12 prevalent mindsets that I had inherited and needed to untangle. And when I started organizing the book in chapters, I realized that those 12 mindsets fit into 3 different categories. And those were self, strategy, and social. And the ways that I talk about those is self being basically my relationship with myself, like how I see myself and understand myself. Strategy being my relationship with the world and the things that I just need to know to get through living day to day. And then social being my relationships with other people. And that's how I start, is I start with those 3 categories. When I'm, for example, not feeling my best self, I try to figure out, is this depression, where Freud defined depression as rage turned inward? So is this something where I'm just really upset and angry with myself that I need to work through, and I start going through those self mindsets? Or is this something where I'm having an issue with money, or I'm having an issue with productivity, not showing up the way that I want to? That's a strategic thing, and I'll dive into those mindsets. Or is this like a relationship, something that's going on with my husband, something with a conversation that I had with a friend that didn't go the way I wanted it to? Or if I'm feeling lonely or isolated, then I'll dig into those social mindsets. So that's how I think about it, Andrew. When I'm thinking about what's going on with me, I try to start with, all right, self, strategy, or social, and then I dig in and dive into it from there.
Right. So, there's what it really is there's lots of different places to start depending on what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the things that I struggle with is figuring out what's really happening inside, right? If I'm going through anything to actually put my finger on the true cause, because you can point to symptoms, you can point to things that are happening. Well, I'm this, I'm that, and you go, but are you really upset about that? There's a fantastic video online of a woman with a nail in her head and a guy going, and she's going, babe, my head hurts all the time, and he keeps going, what? But it's the nail, and it's like, no, it's not about the nail. It's not about the nail. You go. Probably that probably would fix it. And doing that kind of introspection to figure out where have metrics or kind of a rubric to look back at, to go check out these things. See. Yeah. Oh, okay. Let's think through it, and a process just to kind of be methodical about. Yeah. What's going on, I really can help bring clarity. So yes, super, super helpful. The question for me becomes, okay, now that we're working through these mindsets, how do we get unstuck? How do we break through some of those issues? And what's keeping us stuck? Because there's and I don't mean to keep peppering you with questions before I let you answer, but there's a big component of I can know what the issue is, right? Know that I've got that there's some place I need to optimize along these lines, and even with that knowledge, feel kind of powerless to change. Like, I know that I do this, I know that I'm feeling this, I know that this is a false belief, and yet it keeps reoccurring. It's a common theme, right? Depression and anxiety keep reoccurring. I still, not necessarily me personally, but to sit there and go, those kinds of themes keep coming up. They keep coming back. And I mean, I suppose it could be because we're not dealing with the underlying causes, in those mindsets, as you say. But what can we do about that?
You ask so many good questions in there. I'm struggling with where to begin. I sort of have this agreement with myself when I think about, because it all becomes, you laid it out for us very eloquently, jammed packed, but eloquently. And I think about, that's kind of how it feels to me a lot of times in life, is just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like so much. There's so much going on. I don't know how to unpack this. I don't know what to do about it. And it's in those moments that there are a few things that I have to remind myself of. One is I have adopted this word grace, and it is just the grace to be human. I am someone that I would consider a high performing person. I'm a more than I would like, a people pleaser. And I have to remind myself more than once a day to give myself the grace to be a human being, to make mistakes, to have bad days. And so that's the first thing, grace. The second thing that I have to think about is that I get to make a choice every single day about how I'm going to suffer today. And I think for more enlightened beings than me would tell you that life is about getting to a place where you do not experience suffering. I am not there yet. I still suffer, but I get to choose how I'm going to suffer. I can choose to suffer from my past and my upbringing and the way the world works, and being a gay man in a straight world, and suffer from the way that my dad treated me, and suffer from the internalized homophobia. I can suffer from all of that, and that can be how I suffer today. Or I can suffer toward creating the life that I want for myself. I can suffer toward having a great relationship and marriage with my husband. I can suffer toward creating a good business. I can suffer toward having an impact on people that are going through similar experiences that I am. All of those things are challenges and aren't just going to happen. I'm going to have to put work into it and suffer toward it. And that's a different kind of suffering than sitting here and stewing over what was, what could have been, what should have been yesterday. And so that's another thing that I have to remind myself of, is I get to choose to either suffer from or I can suffer toward. And then I also think about, you mentioned resistances and how we resist and finding that underlying cause. Honestly, Andrew, I have not found the secret to I'm cured of depression, I'm cured of anxiety. And I've sort of adopted this idea that once you have seen rain and know what that is, every time rain occurs, you're going to identify it as rain.
Right.
And I think about that with my depression and anxiety. Like, I've done a lot of work to figure out, like I mentioned, when I was a kid, like they're, oh, Chad's sad all the time. It turns out Chad wasn't sad. Chad was mad. Like, Chad was mad at his dad. Chad was mad at himself for who he was, and figuring out that depression was actually my rage turned inward, and I being able to identify that. What I can do, though, is I can find strategies that allow me to, first of all, when I feel depressed, go, Chad, instead of sitting in front of Netflix or going to bed and sleeping through it, start asking yourself the question, first of all right, what are you mad about? And really start unpacking, what are you mad about? And the things that I may be mad about and cause me to succumb to what I identify as depression, that different circumstances may arise next week, and I'm mad about something else. I'm not dealing with anger and directing it in such a way that helps me. I'm working on it. What I can do is find tools and strategies that help me live with it, that help me experience depression and anxiety less frequently and for a shorter duration.
Hmm.
That's really my goal with it. Not to say that I'll never have it again, but that I know how to deal with it when I identify it.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
that answers your
Yeah. I
question.
mean, it does. And I think that's what we're all trying to do in life in general, is to figure out strategies that make the difficult periods less frequent and have a shorter duration
Yeah,
when they're happening, and to try and maximize the value of the good moments and increase the likelihood that they will occur for longer periods of time and all of that. And it's always a game. I mean, a little bit of a challenge to figure out what those strategies are for each of us individually
absolutely.
that make it work, and kind of an optimization problem. So when it comes to these kinds of things, getting past limiting beliefs and recurring thoughts and all those kinds of things. I mean, I'll tell you my issue, which is that, especially for young people, so much of our belief system comes from other people.
Hmm.
And we labor under this delusion that when we become adults, that now our life, our mindset, everything is ours. And it just isn't,
No.
because it continues to come from other people. But if you don't, and I said this to somebody recently, which was on the subject of getting your dream job, the idea that an 18-year-old will know what they want to do with their life is and to declare for college and all these kinds of things is kind of silly, because to that point, everything that they are has come pretty much from somebody else. They haven't had a moment to think about what they like or what they really want to do and what's actually their passion. The question for me and to you is, we get these things from these belief systems from other people that define our worth, that define our value, that define what we value. How do we start the process of, in a sense, reclaiming our own value and deciding what we value, and cast off those mindsets, those things that have come from others? Are there tricks, tips?
Yeah. There are
Kind of.
tips, there are tricks, but mostly there's work,
Yeah.
right? And it's not fun and it's not pleasant. But if you want to experience what I am picking up from you, Andrew, that someone would want to experience, having meaningful satisfaction in life, having a life that is truly their own, where you're in touch with what brings you joy, what brings you passion, not necessarily out of reaction or a response to what you grew up with or
Yeah,
pleasing
I mean, you're
somebody
trying
else,
to
but
reconcile
what is
those.
me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is me? I think for me, I had to recognize, first of all, that there are seasons of life. There are seasons of life, and I have to give myself permission to go through those seasons and allow those seasons to change and live those seasons of my life. And for me, it was a lot of beating myself up for not sticking with the last season, not continuing on. I have 2 degrees in music education. I was a band director in my last life, and I have friends that got a degree in music education, and they're still band directors, and they hate their lives because they got those degrees. They decided when they were 15, 16 years old
Right.
that this is what I'm going to do. And I think that the trouble with that comes from, we get the degree and we think, well, this is what I'm qualified to do. And the dangerous part is where we say, and therefore I am not qualified to do anything else. And so we never give ourselves permission to explore and to try new things and to go down different avenues, to experiment and figure out what is really us and what is really us living out the consequence of our upbringing. And I also had to remind myself that life itself is just about picking a direction. There's really not much of a destination here except for the grave. And so what is it along the way that I can learn to enjoy, and learning to enjoy the process of figuring it out on its own,
Yeah.
not getting myself addicted to oh, when this happens, when the business hits, when the thing hits, when this all comes about, allowing myself to eliminate that addiction
Mm-hmm.
and fall in love with the journey of getting there.
Yeah.
So if I can pick a direction where I love every day working toward, like I said earlier, suffering toward that thing,
Yes.
that's where we're going to find the joy and the passion and the satisfaction. It's not actually in the ideal destination, because I can assure you that once you get to that place that you've decided is where you need to be, you're immediately going to find the next place that you need to be, and the cycle continues.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's another component for me that really hits home, of the idea of enjoying the journey, and that it is the journey, not the destination. Because I personally, and I'm sure lots of other folks out there, have the issue of looking at things as, in retrospect, as, say, a waste of time or a waste of energy or all these things, because it didn't generate what you'd hoped it would, whether it was time in school or time at this job or time in a relationship. That, I'd hoped that this would be this great thing, and I spent 5 years cultivating whatever, from your education to rose bushes, whatever, and in the end, you spend all that time working on the rose bushes, and then you realize you never look at them. You go, well, was that a waste of time? You go, well, actually, no, because I enjoyed the process of going out and trimming the roses and setting everything, and how pretty they were when I passed by them that one time and looked at them. But it's the process, and it's so easy to get caught up in just, again, you say addiction, destination, checkbox, checkbox. And to never actually be present right now, right here, right in this moment. And
I have a theory that sometimes what you're describing, and this addiction to destination, I think that addiction, my theory about that is that the addiction is because we are seeking validation from the other thing. We're expecting validation from the product and not the becoming.
mm-hmm.
And I struggle with this too, Andrew. I mean, this is a thing where I want to be validated by the clients. I want to be validated by the students. I want to be validated by the number of downloads, instead of recognizing the journey that I'm on and who I'm becoming, and validating my own process of becoming, instead of looking to the outside to validate my process.
Well, boy, is that the truth. Looking inside versus outside for validation is so key, and probably the result of so much unhappiness doing the reverse, right? That everybody, when you're always looking outside for validation, you're probably never gonna get everything that you want to get, because it's all dependent on somebody else. It's again, this otherness, instead of what matters to me, where the validation comes from for me inside. I am proud of the job that I did. Whatever somebody else thinks, whatever somebody else feels about me, I am proud of who I am. I am proud of the job I did putting this podcast together, and it's going to be what it's going to be. But that's a hard one to do. I mean, it's
super hard.
So it's right.
So hard.
Easier said than done. But
very much,
man. So you've had this process. You've figured things out. You've spent your time
figuring things out.
You're continuing to figure things out. What has been possible for you that wouldn't have been possible had you not taken the time to figure this out?
Yeah, I love that question. I alluded to a little bit of my upbringing with my family, and I haven't spoken to my dad in almost 13 years. He's still alive, living in Arkansas. One of the things that I wrote about in the book was, when I was a kid, my dad would shoot my dogs. He was very cruel. Yeah. And I would wake up one Saturday morning and like, where's my dog? And my mom's like, oh, your daddy shot him. He looked at him the wrong way. And that kind of trauma leaves a person, in some ways, a kid, hollowed out a little bit. But by doing the work, I am now married to the love of my life. We've been married for 7 years. We got married when it became legal in 2015. We've been together since 2009. When I married him, I gained a family and a father figure in his dad that loves me like his own. And I love him as if he were my own father. And I definitely gained that. I have a standard poodle, which is the man's poodle, in case anyone's confused by that. It is the man's poodle. And I got that dog when she was 6 weeks old. And I love that dog like I would imagine someone loves their kid. And I never would have thought before doing the work that I set out in doing and writing about in Break and Untangle that I would have a family that I love and feel close to and can trust. By having this little creature, this four-legged creature in my life that I love as much as I do, being able to experience those things have brought me so much joy and love, and has made all the work worth it. And there's so much more, but those are 2 or 3 examples that mean the most to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're coming to the end here. I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask everybody. The first one is, and these are, you can go general, you can go specific to your particular area of expertise, but what do you feel like the biggest fallacy is that everybody buys into that just turns out to be utter hogwash? What's overrated?
I would say for me, and this goes back to your story about the woman that had the nail in her head, that we're all going to figure it out on our own. That we live in a culture where it's, I'm going to pick myself up by my bootstraps and I'm going to do it. And we wear our badge of independence, our independence like a badge of honor. And we got there on our own and we're self-made. And I just do not buy into that. I did for a very long time because I had to. But life is so much richer and deeper and fuller. And when you can allow other people into your life and allow other people to help you and allow other people to support you and to love you. And so what is overrated? It is this idea that we are meant to do it all on our own.
Right. And that it's even possible to do it all
exactly.
on our own. Absolutely. So conversely, what is underrated? What do we need more of? What are we missing?
I think that we are missing how similar we all are. I think we're missing one another a lot. And by missing, like, we're not really seeing one another. We're not seeing one another's humanity. We're not seeing one another's common purpose. I think we're missing that we all pretty much want the same things. Yeah. And we play a much bigger role in all of us getting those things than we give ourselves credit for.
Absolutely. Chad, thank you so much for joining me. Folks, if you want to know more about Chad, you can check out his website at chadpeevy.com. And listeners to this podcast get a free copy of his book at chadpeevy.com/free book. Links to everything and all of his socials are in the show notes as always. And until next time, I'm Andrew Wallace, and we don't have a problem. We've got an opportunity.